The great meeting hall of Nexus Prime had never seen such chaos. Representatives from over 1,000 worlds filled the massive crystal dome, their voices mixing into a sound that would drive most beings mad. Some had tentacles that waved in the air. Others had scales that changed color when they got excited. A few looked almost like humans, but with eyes that glowed or skin that sparkled like stars. Ambassador Zera of the Zerian Empire stood at the center podium. Her 8 tentacles moved in patterns that showed how worried she was. Each tentacle had small suction cups that could taste the fear in the air. She had called this emergency meeting, and now she had to tell everyone the bad news. "Friends and allies," she began, her voice carrying through translation devices to every corner of the hall. "The ancient enemy has awakened." The hall fell silent. Even the crystalline beings who were always making small chiming sounds went quiet. Everyone knew what she meant. There were stories. Old stories passed down through 1,000,000 years of galactic history. Stories about machines that ate everything. Stories about the void devourers. "Our deep space sensors have confirmed it," Zera continued. "The void devourers are moving again. They have consumed 3 entire star systems in the outer rim. The Kari system is gone. The twin suns of Moldak are now just empty space. Even the fortress world of Grimhold, with all its shields and weapons, lasted only 2 days. Aaron Delegate stood up. His people looked like giant birds made of liquid metal. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "How many ships do we need? My people can provide 50,000 warships. Our plasma cannons can burn through any armor." "Not enough," said the representative from the crystalline dominion. She looked like a walking diamond, beautiful and deadly. "My people have built reality warpers, ships that can change the laws of physics around them. We have 200 of them ready." One by one, the great powers of the galaxy announced their contributions. The ethereals, mysterious beings who existed in multiple dimensions at once, promised their phase ships that could attack from spaces that did not exist. The machine collectives offered computing power that could calculate the movements of every enemy ship. The Psi-Orcs promised mental attacks that could drive artificial intelligences insane. The numbers grew bigger and bigger. Hundreds of thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, weapons that could crack planets, and shields that could stop black holes. The galaxy was gathering the largest military force in history. Then the human ambassador stood up. Admiral Sarah Chen was a small woman compared to most of the aliens in the room. She had gray hair and lines around her eyes that came from years of command. Her uniform was simple blue cloth with metal badges, nothing fancy, nothing that glowed or changed colors. She looked ordinary. "The United Earth Systems will contribute to this defense," she said in a clear, calm voice. The hall waited. Everyone expected the humans to offer their entire fleet. Humanity was new to the galactic community, only 200 years since first contact. But they had proven themselves in several small wars. Their ships were primitive by galactic standards, using chemical rockets and kinetic weapons instead of exotic energy systems, but they fought with a determination that impressed even veteran warriors. "We will send 1 ship," Admiral Chen said. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then everyone started talking at once. "1 ship." The Alaran delegate's metal feathers ruffled. "Did the translation system make a mistake?" "Surely you mean 1 fleet," said the crystalline representative. "1 battle group, perhaps." Zer waved her tentacles for quiet. "Admiral Chen, I must ask you to clarify. Did you say 1 ship?" "That is correct," Chen replied. She did not seem embarrassed or worried. "Humanity will send 1 ship to join this defense." The hall erupted again. Some delegates laughed, though it sounded more like steam escaping from pressure valves or crystals breaking. Others made sounds of anger or confusion. A few whispered among themselves, trying to understand what the humans were thinking. Commander Thex of the warrior clan stood up. He was 3 meters tall, covered in scales that could stop laser fire, and had 4 arms that ended in claws sharp enough to cut through steel. "Human, do you mock us? Do you not understand the threat we face? The Void Devourers destroyed the first galactic empire. They consumed civilizations that had ruled for millions of years. They cannot be stopped by brave words and primitive weapons." Admiral Chen looked at him without fear. Humans had a reputation for being either very brave or very stupid. Sometimes both at the same time. Commander, thanks. I understand your concern, but humanity will send one ship. That is our decision. What kind of ship? Asked the ethereal representative. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. A battleship? A carrier? A planet killer. You will see when it arrives, Chen said. I can tell you that it carries the hopes of humanity and the finest weapons our people have ever built. The Zephyrian ambassador tried to restore order. Perhaps the humans have a special weapon, a new technology they have not shared with us. Is this correct, Admiral Chen? Chen smiled slightly. It was not a happy smile, but it was not sad either. It was the smile of someone who knew something others did not. Ambassador Zur, humanity has always believed that the best way to solve a problem is to find the right tool for the job. We have found the right tool. One ship against millions of void devourers. The crystalline representative's body flashed angry red colors. This is madness. Your people will die, and their sacrifice will mean nothing. Perhaps, Chen admitted, but we have made our choice. Where should our ship report for duty? Zara consulted her datapad. Her tentacles moved over the controls like a musician playing an instrument. The convergence point is the Kepler Nebula. All fleets will gather there to make our stand. The tactical committee will assign your ship a position in the support formation. Our ship will take whatever position you think is best, Chen said. But I should warn you about something. What? Asked. Our ship is loud, Chen said. Very loud. Some of your more sensitive equipment might want to keep a safe distance. Before anyone could ask what she meant, Admiral Chen turned and walked out of the hall. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Every eye in the room followed her until the doors closed behind her. The debates went on for hours after that. Some delegates thought the humans were hiding something. Maybe they had built a secret superweapon. Maybe their one ship was actually a disguised battle station. Maybe they had found a way to control the void devourers instead of fighting them. Others thought humanity had simply gone insane from fear. The stress of facing an enemy that had destroyed galactic civilizations before their planet had even cooled from its formation had broken their minds. They were sending one ship because they could not accept the truth that one ship would make no difference. A few, the wisest ones, remembered that humans had surprised everyone before. When the Centauri Confederacy had thought Earth would surrender after losing their first fleet, the humans had built 10 more fleets and kept fighting. When the Ryle pirates had expected humans to pay tribute like everyone else, humanity had hunted them across 3 star systems until not one pirate ship remained. Humans were new to space, but they learned fast. They adapted faster, and they never ever gave up. But even those who respected humanity's determination could not understand how one ship could make a difference against the void devourers. The mathematics were simple. Millions of enemy ships versus one human vessel. The only question was how long that one ship would survive. In the hours that followed, as representatives returned to their home worlds to prepare their fleets, messages flew across the galaxy. Military commanders studied tactical projections. Scientists worked on new weapons. Entire populations prepared for evacuation if the defense failed. And in the solar system, something moved. Deep in the asteroid belt beyond Mars, but before Jupiter, construction scaffolds that had surrounded the dwarf planet Ceres for 50 years began to fall away. The scaffolds were enormous, big enough to build a moon, and they had been humanity's greatest secret. Other races knew the humans were building something out there, but every attempt to scan it had been blocked by interference fields and debris clouds. Now the scaffolds drifted apart like flower petals, and what they had been hiding was revealed. It was a ship, but calling it a ship was like calling a hurricane a breeze. The vessel stretched nearly 100 kilometers from end to end. Its hull was dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Along its sides, weapon ports opened and closed like breathing holes. At its front, sensor arrays spread out like the antenna of some enormous insect. This was humanity's answer to the void devourer threat. Not a fleet, not an army, but a single ship, built with every resource Earth and its colonies could provide. 50 years of construction, the greatest minds of humanity working on its design. Technologies borrowed, adapted, and improved from every race that had ever traded with Earth. The ship had a name carved into its hull, in letters 10 meters tall. UEE's Righteous Thunder. Inside the massive vessel, 12,000 humans prepared for the journey that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge, which was larger than most space stations. Around him, holographic displays showed the status of every system on the ship. There were a lot of systems. All departments report ready, said his first officer, Commander Lisa Park. She was young for such a position. But then again, everyone on the ship was young by the standards of other races. Humans lived fast lives and made fast decisions. Very well, Captain Webb said. Signal Earth Command that we are beginning our journey. Then activate the fold drive. The fold drive was humanity's greatest secret. Other races traveled faster than light by jumping through hyperspace or sliding through dimensions that were easier to move through. Humans had found a different way. They folded space itself, bringing their destination closer instead of moving their ship faster. It was dangerous, it was expensive, and it worked. Space around the Righteous Thunder began to ripple like water. The stars shifted and bent. For a moment, the laws of physics seemed to pause and consider whether to allow what was happening. Then the ship vanished. Across the galaxy, sensor networks detected the fold signature. Military analysts tried to calculate where the human ship was going and how fast it would arrive. The energy readings were confusing. The ship seemed to mass more than a small planet, but that was impossible. No ship could be that heavy and still move. Some of the readings made no sense at all. Energy signatures that should not exist, gravitational effects that broke known laws, weapon systems that the computers could not classify. The Galactic Defense Committee sent urgent messages to their best scientists. What were the humans really sending? What kind of ship could generate such readings? But there was no time for proper analysis. The Void Devourers were moving too fast. 3 more star systems had gone dark, while the galaxy argued about humanity's single ship. The enemy would reach the Kepler Nebula in days. All across the galaxy, fleets began to move. The greatest armada in history was assembling, carrying weapons that could destroy planets and shields that could survive supernovas. Ship after ship jumped into hyperspace, racing toward what might be the last battle of galactic civilization. And somewhere in the folded spaces between stars, the Righteous Thunder continued its journey. Inside its hull, humans checked their weapons and said their prayers, and prepared to show the galaxy why sometimes one ship was enough. The cannons had not yet thundered, but the storm was coming. Captain Marcus Webb had been awake for 36 hours, but his eyes were still sharp as he watched the main display on the bridge of the Righteous Thunder. The ship was moving through folded space, at speeds that would make other races' fastest vessels look like they were standing still. But inside the fold bubble, time moved strangely. Minutes could feel like hours, or hours could pass in what felt like seconds. Stat report, he said to Commander Park, who was managing the dozens of stations around the bridge. Each station monitored a different part of the ship, and there were many parts to monitor. Fold drive operating at 98% efficiency, she replied. We should arrive at the Kepler Nebula in 14 hours local time. All weapon systems are charging. Crew morale is high. Webb nodded. Morale was important on a ship like this. The Righteous Thunder carried 12,000 people, but it was designed to operate with a crew of 50,000. The difference was made up by artificial intelligence systems, quantum computers, and automation that could think and react faster than any living being. But humans were still needed. Humans to make the decisions that no computer could make. Humans to do the jobs that required intuition, creativity, and the kind of stubborn determination that had carried their species from caves to the stars. Any word from the other fleets? Webb asked. The Altarian fleet reports they have reached the nebula and begun setting up defensive positions. The Christine ships are still in transit, but should arrive within the hour. The Ethereals, Park paused. The Ethereals are already there, but also not there, if that makes sense. Webb smiled. Ethereal ships existed in multiple dimensions at once. They could be in a place, and not in a place at the same time. It gave most people headaches to think about it, but it made them very hard to hit in battle. What about the enemy? Long-range sensors show the Void Devourers are moving faster than expected. They consumed the Helix colony 6 hours ago. Current projections put them at the nebula in 20 hours. 20 hours. Not much time to prepare for the largest battle in galactic history. Webb looked at the tactical display which showed the positions of friendly forces gathering at the Kepler Nebula. Thousands of ships were already there, with thousands more arriving every hour. It looked impressive, until you remembered that the enemy was bringing millions. "Sir," said Lieutenant Torres from the communication station, "we're receiving a priority message from Galactic Defense Command. They want to know our ship specifications for tactical planning." Webb and Park exchanged a look. This was the question they had been expecting. The other races wanted to know what kind of ship humanity was really sending. They wanted to know what weapons the Righteous Thunder carried, how fast it could move, how much damage it could take. "Send them our standard response," Webb said. "Tell them we prefer to show rather than tell." It was not the first time they had given that answer. For 50 years, while the ship was being built, other races had tried to learn its secrets. Spies had attempted to infiltrate the construction sites. Diplomatic missions had asked innocent questions about human military technology. Trade delegations had offered valuable resources in exchange for technical specifications. Humanity had politely declined to share any details. They had learned through 2 centuries of contact with galactic civilization that information was often more valuable than weapons. The galaxy was full of races that could copy any technology they could examine, improve any design they could study, and adapt any weapon they could analyze. So the Righteous Thunder had been built in secret, using principles and technologies that no other race had ever seen. Its construction had required the combined resources of Earth and all its colonies. Entire asteroid fields had been mined for raw materials. The brightest scientists and engineers from across human space had worked on its design. Every human military technology, from the most basic to the most advanced, had been incorporated into its systems, and now it was almost time to see if all that work had been worth it. Signal from the engine room. "Sir," reported Chief Petty Officer Kim, "Chief Engineer Hassan wants to speak with you." Webb touched a control and a hologram appeared next to his command chair. Engineer Hassan was a woman in her 50s with grease on her uniform and satisfaction on her face. She had been working on the ship's systems for 20 years, first during construction and now as the chief engineer. "Captain, I wanted to report that all fusion reactors are operating at maximum efficiency. The antimatter containment systems are stable, and the special systems," she paused and grinned. "The special systems are ready to make some noise." "How much noise?" Webb asked. "The kind of noise that can be heard across star systems, sir. The kind of noise that makes planets shake in their orbits. The kind of noise that makes the universe sit up and pay attention." Webb thanked her and ended the connection. The special systems were humanity's secret weapon. The reason they were confident that one ship could make a difference. He hoped they would work as designed, but there was only one way to find out. "Fold space exit in 10 minutes, announced the navigation officer. "Prepare for normal space transition." Around the bridge, officers checked their stations and prepared for what they would find when they returned to normal space. Intelligence reports suggested the battle would be the largest in galactic history. Ships from hundreds of races, wielding technologies that most humans could barely understand, would face an enemy that had destroyed civilizations older than Earth itself. And somewhere in all that chaos, the Righteous Thunder would find its place. The countdown reached 0, and space unfolded around them like a flower opening to the sun. One moment they were in the strange gray emptiness of folded space, and the next they were in the Kepler Nebula, surrounded by the most magnificent sight Webb had ever seen. Ships filled the space around them, as far as sensors could reach. Alaran vessels that looked like metal birds with wings made of energy. Crystalline ships that were more like flying jewels. Beautiful and deadly machine collective cubes that bristled with weapons and computing arrays. Ethereal ships that flickered in and out of visible light, like ghosts made of starlight. And there, in the center of it all, was the command station where Admiral Vex of the Alaran Empire was coordinating the defense. The station was sending constant communications to every ship in the fleet, assigning positions, coordinating supply runs, preparing battle plans. "Uses Righteous Thunder. This is Admiral Vex. Please respond." Webb activated the communication system. "Admiral, this is Captain Marcus Webb, reporting for duty." There was a pause. When Vex spoke again, his voice sounded confused. Captain Webb, our sensors are having difficulty reading your ship. Could you please transmit your technical specifications? I'm afraid we don't share technical specifications, Admiral, but we are ready to fight wherever you need us. Another paused longer this time. Webb could imagine the conversations happening on the command station. The aliens had been expecting a small human warship, maybe a cruiser or a battleship. What they were seeing did not match their expectations. Captain Webb, Vex said finally, your ship appears to be larger than anticipated, and our sensors are detecting energy signatures we do not recognize. What exactly are you bringing to this battle? Whatever it takes to win, Admiral. That is not an answer, Captain. We need to know your capabilities, so we can assign you an appropriate position in the battle line. Are you a battleship? A carrier? A support vessel? Webb looked at the tactical display, which showed the positions of hundreds of thousands of Allied ships arranged in defensive formations around the nebula. Each ship had been assigned a role based on its capabilities. Fast ships on the flanks, to harass enemy formations. Heavy ships in the center to absorb the main attack. Support ships in the rear to provide supplies and repairs. Where did a ship like the Righteous Thunder fit in such a plan? It was too big to be fast, too unusual to be predictable, and too secret to be properly understood. Admiral, Webb said, I suggest you put us wherever you think we can do the most good. We'll adapt to whatever role you need us to fill. Very well, Vex replied, though he still sounded uncertain. Report to Sector 7. You will be assigned to the reserve formation under General Crix of the warrior clans. Try not to get in the way of the real warships. Webb smiled at that. The reserve formation was where commanders put ships they did not know what to do with. It was also where they put ships they did not expect to survive the first attack. But it would do. Understood, Admiral. Righteous Thunder moving to Sector 7. The great ship began to move, and immediately every sensor in the fleet began registering impossible readings. The ship seemed to mass more than a small moon, but it accelerated like a fighter craft. Its energy signature suggested power systems beyond anything known to galactic science. Its weapon ports were opening and closing in patterns that no computer could predict. On the command station, Admiral Vex stared at his sensor displays in confusion. His technical officers were frantically trying to understand what they were seeing. The human ship was breaking several laws of physics just by existing and seemed to be preparing to break several more. Sir, said his sensor officer, I'm reading massive gravitational distortions around the human ship. It's like they're carrying a compressed star in their cargo hold. That's impossible, Vex replied. No ship could contain that much mass and still function. Yes, sir. Should I report a sensor malfunction? Vex looked at the display again. The human ship was now in position with the reserve formation, and other ships were keeping a respectful distance from it. Even the warrior clan vessels, which feared nothing in the galaxy, seemed nervous around the mysterious human warship. No, he said finally. Don't report anything yet. Let's see what the humans actually do before we decide their ship is impossible. In Sector 7, the Righteous Thunder took its position among the reserve ships. General Crix, commanding from his flagship, sent a brief welcome message and then ignored them. He had more important things to worry about than one mysterious human vessel. But the other ships in the reserve formation could not ignore what they were seeing. The Righteous Thunder was huge, but size was not the strangest thing about it. The ship seemed to bend light around itself, making it hard to look at directly. Its weapon ports glowed with energies that their sensors could not identify. And there was something about it that made experienced warriors feel uneasy, like standing next to a sleeping volcano. Captain Webb stood on his bridge and watched the tactical displays show the entire Allied fleet. Nearly 1 million ships from hundreds of races carrying the most advanced weapons and defenses galactic science could produce. It was an impressive sight, and it might not be enough, sir, said Commander Park. Long-range sensors are detecting the enemy fleet. They're still 18 hours out, but the readings are significant. Webb looked at the sensor data streaming across his displays. The Void Devourers were not just bringing ships. They were bringing swarms, millions of vessels of every size, from fighters smaller than shuttles to motherships larger than space stations. They moved like a living thing, flowing through space in patterns that seemed both random and perfectly coordinated. And at the center of the swarm, something that sensors could barely detect, something that might be a ship or might be a weapon, or might be something else entirely. Something that made every artificial intelligence in the galaxy feel afraid, though none of them could explain why. 18 hours, Webb said quietly. Pass the word to all departments. Final preparations, final checks, final prayers for anyone who believes in them. Around the ship, 12,000 humans made ready for battle. Engineers tested systems that had never been fired in anger. Gunners ran simulations on weapons that could crack planets. Marines checked equipment designed for fighting in environments that no human had ever encountered. And in the deepest parts of the ship, in chambers that did not appear on any schematic, special systems hummed with power that defied every known law of science. Systems that had taken 50 years to build and might work for only a few minutes. Systems that represented humanity's best guess at what would be needed to fight an enemy that had destroyed galactic civilizations. The cannons had not yet thundered, but they were loaded and ready. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn why humanity had sent only one ship, and the righteous thunder would show them all what human determination looked like when it was given unlimited resources and 50 years to prepare for war. The Kepler Nebula had become the center of galactic civilization overnight. Nearly 1 million warships from hundreds of worlds floated in carefully arranged formations, their combined mass enough to affect the gravity of nearby stars. Command ships coordinated movements with streams of encrypted communications. Supply vessels moved between the battle groups, delivering ammunition and fuel for what everyone expected to be the longest battle in recorded history. Admiral Vex stood in the command center of his flagship, the Soaring Eagle, and tried not to show his fear. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every ship in the fleet, color-coded by race and function. Blue for Alarian vessels, red for the warrior clans, silver for the machine collectives, and dozens of other colors for dozens of other races. It was beautiful in its complexity, like a three-dimensional work of art made from starships. But there was one ship that did not fit the pattern, one ship that the computers could not properly classify or position. The human vessel floated with the reserve formation in Sector 7, but it showed up on sensors as a gray blob that hurt to look at. Its mass readings changed every few minutes, as if the ship was somehow becoming heavier and lighter at the same time. Its energy signature looked like nothing in any database, any new intelligence on the human ship. Vex asked his science officer, Colonel Nex. Nothing useful, sir. Our best sensors can penetrate about 50 meters into its hull before the readings become meaningless. It's like the ship is made of folded space-time instead of normal matter. The energy readings suggest they have power systems that should be impossible with known technology. Weapons. We can identify approximately 15,000 individual weapon ports of various sizes, but we have no idea what comes out of those ports when they fire. 15,000 weapons on a single ship. Most battleships carried fewer than 100. Even the massive dreadnoughts of the elder races rarely exceeded 500 weapon systems. What kind of ship needed 15,000 guns? Sir, called the communications officer, we're receiving a signal from the outer sensor net. The enemy fleet has been detected. The main display changed to show the approaching void devourers. At first, it looked like a cloud of static, millions of tiny contacts moving in seemingly random patterns. But as the computer processed the sensor data, patterns began to emerge. The enemy was not moving randomly at all. They were flowing through space, like a living organism. Individual ships moving in perfect coordination with the whole. Enemy numbers? Vex asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad. Approximately 4 million vessels of various sizes. They're maintaining formation at 1/4 light speed, but that could change without warning. Estimated arrival time, 6 hours. 4 million enemy ships against 1 million defenders. The mathematics were not encouraging, but Vex had seen worse odds before. Not much worse, but worse. And the defenders had advantages that numbers alone could not overcome. They were fighting in a prepared position, with supply lines and repair facilities close at hand. They had coordinated battle plans developed by the finest military minds in the galaxy. Most importantly, they were fighting together. Hundreds of races setting aside their differences to face a common threat. Signal all fleet commanders, Vex ordered. Final briefing in 1 hour. All ships are to complete battle preparations and take assigned positions. The next hour passed quickly. Across the vast fleet, weapons were loaded, shields were charged, and crews made their final preparations. On some ships, warriors sharpened their claws or checked their personal armor. On others, engineers ran final diagnostics on quantum computers or exotic matter containment systems. A few races held religious ceremonies, asking their gods for victory, or at least for honorable death. In Sector 7, the reserve formation received its orders with mixed feelings. The reserves would not engage the enemy until the main battle lines had been tested. This meant they would either never fight at all if the front lines held, or they would fight when the situation was already desperate. Neither option was particularly appealing to warriors who had traveled across the galaxy for this battle. General Crix, commanding the reserve from his fortress ship, Iron Thunder, reviewed his forces one final time. 40,000 ships from a dozen races held back to counter enemy breakthroughs or exploit unexpected opportunities. Most were veteran units, experienced in battle and reliable under pressure. But there was one ship that made him nervous. The human vessel, Righteous Thunder, floated near the center of his formation, and even his most hardened warriors gave it plenty of space. There was something unsettling about the ship that went beyond its unusual sensor readings. It seemed to radiate a kind of quiet menace, like a predator waiting to strike. His technical officers had given up trying to analyze its systems, and his tactical staff had no idea how to use it effectively. "Any word from the humans about their capabilities?" he asked his aide, Colonel Vor. "Nothing new, sir. They maintain that they prefer to demonstrate rather than explain. The ship's captain seems confident, but humans always seem confident. It's one of their more annoying characteristics." Crix grunted agreement. Humans were strange creatures, soft-bodied and short-lived, but they had a way of exceeding expectations. Their ships were primitive by galactic standards, using kinetic weapons and chemical propulsion like races that had just discovered space travel. But somehow, they made those primitive systems work with devastating effectiveness. Still, one ship could not change the outcome of a battle involving millions of vessels. The Righteous Thunder would fight and probably die with the rest of them, and hopefully it would take a few enemy ships with it when it went down. "Sir," called the sensor officer, "enemy fleet is adjusting course and speed. New arrival time 4 hours. The Void Devourers were accelerating, eager to begin the slaughter." Long-range sensors showed their formations shifting and changing, individual ships moving to new positions with mechanical precision. At the center of their fleet, the massive command ships that directed the swarm began broadcasting signals that no computer could decode, but every artificial intelligence could somehow understand. Signals that spoke of hunger and consumption, and the joy of turning order into chaos. On the bridge of the Righteous Thunder, Captain Webb watched the tactical displays with calm attention. Around him, his bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, monitoring systems and preparing for battle. The ship's artificial intelligence systems hummed with activity, calculating targeting solutions, and coordinating with weapon systems that most galactic races had never imagined. "Status report," Webb said to Commander Park. "All systems operational. Weapon ports are charged and ready. The special systems are standing by for activation on your command. Crew morale remains high, though some of the newer personnel are showing signs of pre-battle stress." Webb nodded. Fear before battle was normal, even healthy. It kept people alert and focused. But too much fear could paralyze, and the crew of the Righteous Thunder could not afford to be paralyzed. "Pass the word to all departments," he said. "Remind everyone why we're here, remind them what we're fighting for, and remind them that this ship was built for exactly this moment." The message went out through the ship's communication systems, carried to every deck and every compartment. 12,000 humans heard their captain's words and felt their fear transform into something else. Not courage exactly, but determination, the kind of stubborn refusal to give up that had carried their species from caves to the stars. In the weapons bays, gunners made final adjustments to targeting systems that had been calibrated for this specific battle. In the engine rooms, engineers watched power levels climb toward redline and beyond. In the command centers, tactical officers studied enemy formations and planned attacks that no other race had ever attempted. And in the special chambers deep in the ship's core, Systems that defied known physics came online, with a sound-like reality cracking at the seams. "Enemy fleet entering extreme weapons range," reported the tactical officer. "First contact in 30 minutes. Across the Allied fleet, 1,000,000 ships prepared for battle. Weapon systems that could sterilize planets powered up with whines and hums and crackling discharges of exotic energy. Shield generators created barriers that could stop black holes. Sensors swept space for the first sign of enemy movement, and then the Void Devourers attacked. They came like a tide of dark metal, millions of ships moving with perfect coordination. The first wave hit the outer sensor nets and destroyed them without slowing down. The second wave engaged the advanced scouts, small, fast ships that tried to gather intelligence on enemy capabilities. Most of the scouts died in the first few seconds, but a few survived long enough to transmit data that made no sense. The Void Devourers were not using energy weapons or exotic particles or any of the advanced technologies that dominated galactic warfare. They were using matter, raw, simple matter, accelerated to incredible speeds, and hurled at their targets like bullets from a gun. It was a primitive technique that every military academy taught as historical curiosity, something that barbaric races used before they discovered proper weapons. But there was nothing primitive about the way the enemy used it. Their projectiles moved at significant fractions of light speed, carrying enough kinetic energy to crack battle cruisers in half. They fired in perfectly coordinated vols, thousands of ships launching their attacks at precisely the same instant to overwhelm defensive shields through sheer mass of fire. And they learned. Every shot that missed was analyzed. Every defensive maneuver was recorded. Every shield frequency was cataloged. By the time the third wave attacked, the enemy was already adapting their tactics to counter Allied defenses. "All ships, engage at will," Admiral Vex ordered. "Show them what galactic civilization can do." The response was magnificent and terrible. 1,000,000 warships opened fire at once, filling space with energies that made stars seem dim by comparison. Plasma bolts that could melt asteroids, quantum torpedoes that existed in multiple dimensions, reality warping fields that changed the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas. Every weapon that galactic science had ever devised was brought to bear against the approaching enemy. The first few Void Devourer ships died, their hulls cracked open by forces beyond their ability to resist. But the rest kept coming, and they were learning from every hit. Their armor adapted to resist plasma. Their shields shifted frequency to deflect quantum attacks. Their formation patterns changed to minimize damage from reality warpers. Within minutes, the advanced weapons that had destroyed the first enemy ships were becoming less effective. Within an hour, they were almost useless. The Void Devourers had learned to counter every exotic technology the galaxy could produce, turning the defenders' greatest advantages into mere annoyances. The battle lines began to buckle under the weight of numbers. Ship after ship fell silent as the enemy swarm engulfed them. The beautiful formations that had taken hours to arrange dissolved into chaos as individual vessels fought for survival against overwhelming odds. "Reserve formations prepare to advance," General Crix ordered. The time for sitting back and watching was over. If the main battle lines collapsed completely, there would be nothing left to defend. On the bridge of the Righteous Thunder, Captain Webb watched the battle unfold with calm interest. The tactical display showed friendly contacts winking out of existence as enemy forces overwhelmed position after position. It was exactly what he had expected to see. "Sir," said Commander Park, "General Crix is ordering all reserve units to advance and support the main battle line." "Acknowledge the order," Webb replied. "But maintain current position, sir. The battle is developing as anticipated, Commander. The enemy is demonstrating their ability to adapt to exotic technologies and overwhelming tactics through superior numbers. It's time to show them something different." Webb touched a control on his command chair, and throughout the Righteous Thunder, alert signals began to sound. Not the general quarters alarm that called crews to battle stations. They were already there. This was the special signal that meant the moment had finally arrived. The moment they had trained for, planned for, and built their entire ship around. "All weapon systems prepare for full engagement," Webb ordered. "Activate special protocols. Authorization code. Thunder 77 Alpha." Deep in the ship, systems that had never been used in battle came online, with a sound like the universe clearing its throat. weapon ports that had remained sealed, opened with mechanical precision, targeting systems that operated on principles no other race understood, locked onto enemy formations with predatory focus. The righteous thunder began to move forward, leaving the reserve formation behind. It accelerated slowly at first, then faster, until it was moving toward the enemy, at speeds that should have been impossible for something so large. General Crix, to Righteous Thunder, came a signal on the communication channel. You are ordered to maintain formation and await further instructions. Captain Webb activated the response system. General, with respect, we are engaging the enemy as ordered. Thank you for the opportunity to serve alongside your forces. He closed the channel before Crix could respond. Around him, the bridge crew worked with focused intensity as their ship approached the battle zone. They could see the enemy swarm ahead, millions of dark shapes moving through space like a plague of mechanical locusts. Range to nearest enemy formation? Webb asked. 50,000 kilometers and closing, reported the tactical officer. Recommend we begin firing at maximum range to test their defenses. Negative, Webb said. We fire when we can be sure of hitting what we aim at. The galaxy is about to learn something important about humanity. What's that, sir? Webb smiled, and it was not a gentle expression. That sometimes the oldest solutions are the best solutions, and that humans have never forgotten how to build a really big gun. The Righteous Thunder continued its advance toward the heart of the enemy fleet and across the galaxy. Sensors recorded its approach with growing confusion and alarm. Whatever the humans were planning, it was not in any tactical manual ever written. The cannons had not yet thundered, but the thunder was coming. The Righteous Thunder moved through space like a force of nature, its massive bulk accelerating toward the enemy fleet with impossible grace. Around it, the battle raged with increasing desperation, as Allied forces found their most advanced weapons becoming less effective by the minute. The Void Devourers were learning, adapting, evolving their defenses to counter every exotic technology the galaxy could deploy against them. Captain Webb stood on his bridge and watched the tactical displays with the calm of a man who had been preparing for this moment his entire life. The enemy swarm was vast, millions of ships moving in coordination patterns that hurt to think about, but he could see the gaps in their formation, the places where human weapons could do the most damage. Range to primary target formation? He asked. 30,000 kilometers, replied Lieutenant Commander Torres. Enemy vessels are maintaining defensive spacing, but they appear to be concentrating their largest units for a breakthrough attempt. Webb nodded. The Void Devourers had studied the Allied formations and identified the weak points. They were gathering their heavy ships for a concentrated assault that would shatter the defense line like glass. It was good strategy, the kind that had served them well for millions of years, but they had never faced humans before. All weapon systems stand by, Webb ordered. Target the enemy concentration. Full spread maximum penetration around the ship. 15,000 weapon ports opened simultaneously. The sound was like thunder trapped in metal, a deep rumbling that vibrated through every deck and corridor. Systems that had been built in the deepest secrecy. Over 50 years of construction came online, with displays of power that made nearby space itself seem to hold its breath. But what emerged from those weapon ports was not energy, beams, or exotic particles, or reality-warping fields. What emerged was metal. Simple, honest, incredibly dense metal, moving at velocities that approached the speed of light. The first salvo contained 10,000 projectiles, each one a masterpiece of human engineering. They were not simple bullets or crude kinetic rounds. Each projectile was guided by its own artificial intelligence, powered by its own fusion reactor, and equipped with sensors that could track targets across interplanetary distances. Some carried anti-adder warheads designed to crack open the heaviest armor. Others held quantum disruptors that could destabilize matter at the atomic level. A few contained what human engineers simply called planet crackers, weapons so destructive that their technical specifications were classified at levels that required unanimous approval from Earth's entire government to access. But the most devastating thing about them was not their warheads or their guidance systems. It was their speed. Human physicists had solved the problem of accelerating matter to relativistic velocities without destroying it in the process. Each projectile left the Righteous Thunder moving at 60% of light speed, carrying kinetic energy measured in gigatons. The Void Devourers had no defense against simple physics applied with overwhelming force. The first enemy ship died before its sensors could register the incoming projectile. One moment, it was a 3-kilometer-long battle cruiser, bristling with weapons and adaptive armor. The next moment, it was an expanding cloud of superheated plasma, its matter scattered across thousands of cubic kilometers of space. The second ship had time to detect the attack and begin evasive maneuvers. Its adaptive systems tried to analyze the threat and develop countermeasures, but there are no countermeasures against mass moving at relativistic speeds. The projectile punched through its hull like it was made of tissue paper, and the antimatter warhead detonated inside its core reactor. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The third ship managed to activate its shields and reinforce its armor. The human projectile struck the barrier and went right through it. The Void Devourers had learned to stop energy weapons and exotic particles, but they had no protocols for dealing with solid matter moving at significant fractions of light speed. Their adaptive systems had no reference point for such primitive, yet devastatingly effective weapons. In the space of 30 seconds, the first salvo from the Righteous Thunder destroyed over 8,000 enemy ships. It was the most successful single attack in the history of galactic warfare, and it was just the beginning. Second salvo. Fire. Webb ordered. Another 10,000 projectiles screamed across space, each one targeted at a specific enemy vessel. This time, the Void Devourers were ready, or thought they were. Their formations scattered, trying to present smaller targets. Their ships activated every defensive system they possessed. Their command vessels frantically transmitted new protocols for dealing with kinetic weapons. None of it mattered. The human projectiles adjusted their courses with mechanical precision, following their targets through every evasive maneuver. When ships tried to hide behind larger vessels, the projectiles simply punched through both targets. When formations scattered, the weapons split apart into smaller submunitions, each one capable of tracking and destroying a separate target. The second salvo claimed another 7,000 enemy ships. Across the Allied fleet, sensor operators stared at their displays in disbelief. The mysterious human ship was single-handedly destroying enemy formations that had been chewing through their most advanced warships like they were made of paper. Admiral Vex watched the tactical display update in real time, showing friendly contact symbols appearing where enemy formations had been moments before. "What kind of weapons are those?" he asked his science officer. "Kinetic projectiles, sir. Metal slugs fired at relativistic speeds. It's actually quite primitive technology in principle, but the execution is far beyond anything we've ever seen." Primitive. Vex stared at the display as another enemy formation vanished under human fire. "How is this primitive?" "The basic concept dates back to the earliest days of space warfare, sir. Most races abandoned kinetic weapons when energy systems became available. They're inefficient, limited in range, and difficult to target accurately at long distances. Those don't look inefficient to me." "No, sir. The humans appear to have solved all the traditional problems with kinetic weapons. Their projectiles are self-guided, self-powered, and somehow maintaining coherence at velocities that should cause them to disintegrate from relativistic effects." On the bridge of the Righteous Thunder, Captain Webb was beginning to enjoy himself. The ship's artificial intelligence systems were coordinating the attack with inhuman precision, calculating trajectories that threaded between friendly ships and struck enemy targets with mathematical certainty. The weapon systems were cycling through their ammunition at a rate that would have exhausted most ships' magazines in minutes. But the Righteous Thunder had been designed for exactly this kind of sustained bombardment. "Third salvo fire," he said, and another 10,000 projectiles joined the deadly ballet-filling space around the nebula. But the enemy was learning as they always did. The Void Devourers began to adapt their tactics to deal with kinetic weapons. They spread their formations wider, making individual targeting more difficult. They positioned smaller ships to intercept incoming projectiles, sacrificing themselves to protect larger vessels. Jermiel say, some ships began using their own matter projectors to create debris fields that might deflect or destroy human rounds. A few of the adaptations worked. The fourth salvo destroyed only 4,000 enemy ships instead of 7,000. The fifth claimed 3,000. The sixth managed barely 2,000 kills as enemy countermeasures became more effective. "They're learning to counter our attacks," Commander Park observed. "Should we adjust our firing patterns?" "Not yet," Webb replied. "Let them think they're solving the problem because the Void Devourers were making the same mistake that many of humanity's enemies had made over the centuries. They assumed that humans were limited to one type of weapon, one tactical approach, one way of thinking about warfare. They were adapting to counter kinetic projectiles, reconfiguring their entire fleet to deal with the threat of relativistic metal slugs. They had forgotten that the Righteous Thunder had 15,000 weapon ports, and so far, they had seen the output of fewer than 100 of them. "Activate secondary battery," Webb ordered. "Target designation area saturation. Let's show them what humans do when kinetic weapons aren't enough." The secondary battery came online with a sound like continents grinding against each other. These were not precision weapons designed to destroy individual targets. These were area effect systems designed to clear large volumes of space, of anything that might be hiding there. What emerged from the secondary ports was still metal, but metal transformed into something that bent the laws of physics in directions they were not supposed to bend. Quantum-etched projectiles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Gravitational rounds that created their own event horizons. Exotic matter shells that converted normal matter into energy on contact. But the most terrifying weapons in the secondary battery were the ones human engineers called space rippers. These were projectiles that did not simply move through space. They tore holes in space-time itself, creating tunnels through which follow-up rounds could travel instantly across vast distances. Each space ripper could open a temporary wormhole that lasted just long enough for a stream of conventional rounds to pour through, emerging inside enemy formations with no warning and no possibility of interception. The Void Devourers had learned to counter kinetic weapons. They had no idea how to counter weapons that ignored the normal rules about where space began and ended. The seventh salvo opened holes in reality itself, and through those holes came destruction beyond the enemy's ability to comprehend. Entire formations vanished in cascading explosions as rounds appeared inside their protective formations. Command ships found themselves under fire from directions that did not exist. The carefully coordinated swarm patterns that had made the Void Devourers so effective for millions of years dissolved into chaos as individual ships lost contact with their command structure. "Eighth salvo fire," Webb said calmly, and more holes opened in space-time. By now, every sensor in the Allied fleet was focused on the human ship. The Righteous Thunder had become the center of the battle, a single vessel that was systematically dismantling an enemy force that had overwhelmed the combined might of galactic civilization. Tactical officers who had spent their careers studying exotic warfare were scrambling to understand weapons that operated on principles they had never encountered. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving priority signals from Admiral Vex. He wants to coordinate our attacks with the main fleet." "Tell the Admiral we appreciate his offer," Webb replied, "but we work better alone. Suggest he use this opportunity to regroup his forces and prepare for the next phase of the enemy attack. Because there would be a next phase. The Void Devourers were not like other enemies humanity had fought. They did not break morale or retreat when faced with unexpected tactics. They learned, they adapted, and they kept coming. The Righteous Thunder had destroyed perhaps 50,000 enemy ships, but there were still millions more approaching, and they were already beginning to develop countermeasures for the new human weapons. "Enemy formations are regrouping," reported the tactical officer. "They appear to be concentrating their largest units for a direct assault on our position." Webb smiled. The enemy had decided that the best way to deal with the human ship was to overwhelm it with sheer numbers. It was not a bad strategy, but it showed they still did not understand what they were facing. "All weapon systems, prepare for maximum rate of fire," he ordered. "Activate tertiary battery authorization code, Thunder 9 Omega." Deep in the ship, in chambers that existed in carefully folded space to fit more weapons than the ship's external dimensions should have allowed, the tertiary battery came online. These were the weapons that had taken 20 years to design and another 20 to build. Weapons that operated on principles so advanced that only a few dozen humans in the entire galaxy understood how they worked. The tertiary battery did not fire metal or energy or exotic particles. It fired concepts, ideas given physical form, and launched at targets with the full force of human determination behind them. When the ninth salvo fired, It did not cross space in the traditional sense. Instead, it convinced space that the distance between the righteous thunder and its targets was actually zero, allowing the weapons to arrive at their destinations instantly, regardless of range or intervening obstacles. Enemy ships found themselves being destroyed by rounds that had somehow always been inside their hulls, waiting for the right moment to explode. The 10th salvo fired ideas about entropy and decay, causing enemy vessels to age 1,000,000 years in the space of seconds and crumble into cosmic dust. The 11th salvo launched the concept of vacuum, creating zones of perfect emptiness that rejected the presence of matter so completely that enemy ships simply ceased to exist when they entered them. By the 12th salvo, the Void Devourers were no longer trying to attack. They were trying to run, but there was nowhere to run to. The righteous thunder had positioned itself perfectly, and its weapons had range measured in light years. Every enemy ship that tried to escape found itself targeted by projectiles that had been fired hours earlier, but chose to arrive at exactly the right moment to intercept their retreat. "Sir," Commander Park said quietly, "enemy forces are there breaking. I've never seen anything like it. They're actually retreating." Webb nodded. The Void Devourers were finally learning the lesson that so many of humanity's enemies had learned before them, that humans were at their most dangerous when they had time to prepare, and most terrifying when they had something worth fighting for. "Continue firing," he said, "until every enemy ship is destroyed or driven from this system. The galaxy needs to see what happens when you threaten humanity's friends." The thunder of the cannons continued to roll across space, and with each salvo, the legend of the righteous thunder grew larger. One ship against millions, and the millions were losing. The silence that followed the final cannon shot was more profound than anything the galaxy had ever experienced. For the first time in millions of years, the Void Devourers had been not just defeated, but completely annihilated. Where once there had been a swarm of 4 million enemy ships, now there was only empty space, dotted with expanding clouds of debris, and the slowly cooling remains of what had been the galaxy's greatest threat, the righteous. Thunder hung motionless in the center of the battlefield, its weapon ports finally quiet after hours of continuous fire. Steam vented from cooling systems that had been pushed beyond their design limits. The ship's hull glowed with residual heat from weapons that had rewritten the laws of physics with each shot, but it was intact, functional, and ready to continue fighting if necessary. On the bridge, Captain Webb stood before the main display and watched the tactical readouts confirm what his eyes could already see. The enemy was gone, not retreated, not regrouping, not preparing for another attack. Gone, destroyed so completely that their adaptive protocols had no opportunity to learn from their defeat. "Final casualty report," he said to Commander Park. "All enemy vessels destroyed or disabled. No confirmed survivors. Allied casualties." She paused, checking her data again. "Allied casualties are remarkably light, sir. The enemy focused most of their attacks on us once we became the primary threat. Most of the other fleets suffered only minor damage." Webb nodded. The Void Devourers had made the tactical decision to concentrate their fire on the ship that was causing them the most damage. It was logical, but it had also protected the rest of the Allied fleet from the worst of the enemy assault. Hundreds of thousands of ships that might have been destroyed were now intact, their crews alive to return home to their families. "Damage report on our vessel superficial only, sir. Some hull scoring from enemy fire, a few minor system overloads from sustained maximum output, but nothing that affects our combat capability." The ship performed exactly as designed. As designed. Webb thought about those words and what they meant. The righteous thunder had been designed for this specific moment, built from the ground up to face an enemy that could adapt to any conventional weapon. 50 years of human ingenuity, determination, and industrial capacity had gone into creating a ship that could do what no other vessel in galactic history had ever accomplished. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving signals from the Allied fleet. Admiral Vex is requesting permission to come aboard." Webb considered that in all the years of construction, no non-human had ever been allowed inside the righteous thunder. The ship's secrets were humanity's most closely guarded military technology. But the battle was over. and perhaps it was time for the galaxy to understand what they had really witnessed. "Grant permission," he said. "Have Admiral Vex and his senior staff transported to Conference Room Alpha. Full honors." The next hour was a whirlwind of activity, as representatives from dozens of races made their way aboard the human ship. They came expecting to see familiar technology, familiar design principles, familiar ways of organizing a military vessel. What they found instead challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare, engineering, and the limits of what was possible. Admiral Vex, the proud leader of the Altarian Empire's fleet, walked through corridors that seemed to stretch longer than they should, given the ship's external dimensions. The walls were lined with displays showing weapon systems he could not identify, power readings that defied known physics and technical specifications, written in mathematical languages that his translation software could not process. "How many crew members does this ship carry?" he asked Captain Webb as they made their way to the conference room. 12,000, Webb replied. Beck stopped walking. 2,000. But this ship is nearly 100 kilometers long. My flagship carries 50,000 crew members, and it's a tenth this size. Humans prefer to automate what can be automated, and reserve crew positions for tasks that require judgment, creativity, or intuition, Webb explained. Most of the ship's functions are controlled by artificial intelligence systems working in coordination with human supervisors. They resumed walking, but Vex found himself studying everything they passed with growing amazement. The ship was not just large, it was impossibly complex. Every surface seemed to serve multiple functions. Every corridor contained systems that served purposes he could not guess at, and throughout it all was a sense of integration, of every component working in perfect harmony with every other component. Conference Room Alpha was large enough to hold representatives from 50 different races, with environmental controls that could provide appropriate atmosphere for each species. As the alien delegates took their seats, they found themselves surrounded by displays showing technical readouts from the recent battle. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," Captain Webb began. "You have questions about what you witnessed today. I will answer what I can, within the limits of military security." General Crix of the warrior clans was the first to speak. "Captain Webb, your ship fired continuously for over 6 hours. How much ammunition did you expend?" Webb smiled. "Less than 1% of our total magazine capacity." The room fell silent. A few delegates made calculations on their personal devices, trying to understand the implications. If the Righteous Thunder had destroyed 4 million enemy ships, using less than 1% of its ammunition, how many enemies could it defeat at full capacity? "What kind of weapons were you using?" asked the crystalline representative. "Our sensors detected kinetic projectiles, but the effects went far beyond simple mass drivers. Humanity has always preferred kinetic weapons," Webb replied. "We find them reliable, effective, and difficult for enemies to counter. But you are correct that our weapons go beyond simple mass drivers. We have developed kinetic systems that incorporate exotic matter, quantum effects, and certain principles of physics that we have learned to manipulate, such as pressed." Admiral Vex Webb paused, considering how much to reveal. Spacime, dimensional folding, causal loop engineering, conceptual weaponization, technologies that allow kinetic projectiles to ignore traditional limitations of range, targeting, and defensive countermeasures. The technical terms meant little to most of the delegates, but the implications were clear. Humanity had developed weapons that operated outside the normal rules of physics, weapons that could not be countered by conventional defenses or traditional tactical thinking. "How long have you been developing these systems?" asked the ethereal representative. 50 years of intensive research and development," Webb answered. "The project began the day we learned about the Void Devourers. Every resource our species could spare was devoted to creating a weapon that could defeat an enemy, capable of adapting to any threat. And you put it all in one ship." General Crick sounded incredulous. "Why not build a fleet of such vessels?" Webb looked around the room, meeting the eyes of beings from dozens of different worlds. "Because one ship was all we needed," he said simply. "And because we learned long ago that it is better to have one weapon that absolutely works than 1,000 weapons that might fail when you need them most." The Zephyrian ambassador, who had been quiet during the exchange, finally spoke. "Captain Webb, Your species sent a single ship to face an enemy that destroyed galactic civilizations. Were you not afraid that you would fail? Of course we were afraid, Webb admitted. Fear is a healthy response to danger, but we were more afraid of what would happen if we did not try. The galaxy deserved to be defended, and humanity was in a position to provide that defense. We could not do otherwise. But why? Pressed the ambassador. Humanity is new to the galactic community. You owe us nothing. You could have retreated to your own systems and left us to face the void devourers alone. Webb was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. When he spoke, his voice carried the conviction of someone who had thought deeply about the question. Ambassador, when humanity first left Earth and encountered other intelligent races, we were amazed by the diversity and wonder of galactic civilization. We saw art that moved us to tears, music that stirred our souls, and ways of thinking that expanded our understanding of what it means to be alive. We saw species that had overcome challenges we could barely imagine, who had built societies based on principles we admired and respected. He gestured to the beings around the table. We saw friends, beings we wanted to know better, to learn from, to share our own discoveries with. The idea of standing by while something destroyed all of that was not acceptable to us. Not because we owed you anything, but because we are all part of something larger than any one species. The room was quiet as the delegates absorbed his words. Finally, Admiral Vex spoke. Captain Webb, what will humanity do now? Will you use your superior technology to dominate the galaxy? Will you demand tribute from the worlds you have saved? Webb looked surprised by the question. Admiral, humanity has no desire to dominate anyone. We prefer cooperation to conquest, trade to tribute. Our technology was developed to defend the galaxy, not to conquer it. We will continue to share what knowledge we can, as we always have, and to be good neighbors to the species around us. But you could conquer us, said General Crix. Your ship alone could destroy any fleet we could assemble against it. Could does not mean should, Webb replied. Humans learned long ago that power without wisdom is dangerous, and wisdom without compassion is meaningless. We have the power to destroy, yes, but we choose to protect instead. The meeting continued for another hour, as delegates asked technical questions about the ship's systems and political questions about humanity's intentions. Webb answered what he could, deflected what he could not, and gradually helped the galaxy's representatives understand that the humans who had saved them were not conquerors in disguise, but exactly what they appeared to be, neighbors who had been willing to risk everything to help friends in need. As the meeting broke up and the delegates prepared to return to their own ships, Admiral Vex approached Webb privately. Captain, he said, I must ask you one final question. The weapons you used today, did you develop them specifically to fight the void devourers? Yes, Webb confirmed. Every system on this ship was designed with that specific enemy in mind. But the void devourers were thought to be extinct. Most races considered them legends, stories to frighten children. How did humanity know they would return? Webb smiled, but it was a tired smile now. The battle was over, but the weight of what they had accomplished was beginning to settle on his shoulders. Admiral, there is something about humans that other races sometimes find difficult to understand. We plan for the worst-case scenario, even when, especially when everyone tells us it will never happen. We prepare for enemies that might never come, disasters that might never occur, and challenges that might never arise. He paused, looking out through the conference room's viewport at the debris field that had once been the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. We sent one ship because one ship was all we needed, but we spent 50 years building that ship because we knew that someday, somehow, something like this would happen. And when it did, we wanted to be ready. The final reports were filed, the last ceremonies completed, and the great fleet began to disperse. Ships from hundreds of worlds turned toward home, carrying news of the victory and stories of the human ship that had saved them all. The righteous thunder remained in the Kepler Nebula for several days, helping with cleanup operations and providing assistance to vessels damaged in the battle. Then, as quietly as it had arrived, the great ship folded space around itself and vanished, returning to the Sol system, where it would be refitted, restocked, and prepared for whatever challenge might come next. But across the galaxy, the story spread and grew. The story of how humanity sent one ship when the galaxy needed salvation. The story of weapons that broke the laws of physics and defenders who would not yield. The story of the day the cannons thundered, and the thunder was heard from one end of the galaxy to the other. And in the years that followed, when other threats arose and other challenges faced galactic civilization, there was always the knowledge that somewhere in the Sol system, the righteous thunder waited in readiness. One ship carrying the hopes of humanity, and the promise that some things are worth fighting for no matter the odds. The galaxy had wondered why humanity sent one ship. Now they understood that humanity had sent exactly what was needed. Not just a weapon, but a statement. A declaration that sometimes the simplest solutions, executed with perfect determination and overwhelming force, could accomplish what all the sophisticated technology in the galaxy could not. And in the silence that followed the final battle, the echo of those cannons continued to reverberate across space and time. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful voice in the universe is the one that speaks through actions rather than words, through thunder rather than whispers, and through the unwavering determination of those who refuse to let evil triumph. The galaxy wondered why humanity sent one ship, and the cannons had thundered in reply.